everyone. Hi, everyone. Hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much for visiting virtually my home again here in Lima, Peru. My name is Vanessa Vasquez. I am your Lima City guide. And today we are going to continue with my series called The Untold History of Peru. In this series, we talk about themes that are not well known, not found among Peruvians, and of course, among a wider international audience. So every time I bring back this series, there is something new. So I'm sure you're going to be thrilled with this story. And oh, hello, Andrea. Thank you so much for coming. It is so nice to see you again. Muchas gracias. Thanks for your participation. I hope you've been already in this series with me. I've been talking about, for example, different cultures that united with the culture of the indigenous after the conquest of the conquistadors, and that form altogether what is the Peruvian culture, right? So we talk about the Afro-Peruvians, we talk about the secret Jewish community of Peru from the colonial times, we talk about the Chinese, the Japanese immigrations, and we're going to continue also with those series just in a little while. But today we are going to talk about a very cruel chapter of the history of Peru, and we're going to understand today the reasons why there was a revolt, why this Chinese community that was resident in Peru turned their back to the Peruvians during the time of the War of the Pacific. If you've been already with me in my series dedicated to the Chinese immigration to Peru, which I hope it was the case, you possibly will have some clues of why this happened. But if you haven't been before in this series, no worries, because I'm going to give you a historic frame, let's say, to understand the reason why the Chinese people that live in Peru in the 19th century, the Chinese immigrants, turned their back to the Peruvians during the War of the Pacific. So before we officially start, and thank you so much, I am just giving extra minutes for people to join to the meeting. This meeting is going to take about 30 minutes. I hope, I cross my fingers. So we're going to also use some images like a PowerPoint presentation. You are here in my house, so I really hope there will not be any disturbing noises. I am using also a new device for, let's say, for make my voice a little bit more clear, so I hope it's working. And well, if you are ready to start with Okay, so can you hear me well, my friends? Is anything getting better? please let me know. Yes, okay, okay, okay. No worries. So I think I fix it. So, okay, sound is back. Muy bien, gracias. Thanks, amigos. Gracias. Thanks for letting me know. Without you, I don't know what I would do. So, muy bien. So we're going now I will go back to or rephrase what I was saying. So I think I was saying that the 19th century was a time of tragedies for Peru, no? The War of the Independence that cost us money and lots of human lives, and also the War of the Pacific at the end of the 19th century, which cost us territories, lots of wealth, and lots of lives also. Yes, gracias, Adrian. So this story there's something very curious. We Peruvians don't talk about this theme in particular, like the revolution of the Chinese, because it is connected with a story that we are ashamed of, which is the way how we treated the Chinese coolies, the Chinese workers in the 19th century. So this is a story that, to me, it was not easy to really to find out, and I had to go to documentaries from another country, Chilean documentaries. I had to go to information that is not found in Peru, but the Chilean, let's say, historians have sort of like recollected, and also give them a sense of pride as well. So you will see why. Also hear all the information about the documentary I based let's say lecture. And if you wish to go and practice your Spanish, please go to that one. Okay, so before we board directly the theme of this revolution, let's take some important elements to the board, historic moments that happened before the time of the revolution of the Chinese in Peru. So first of all, Peru, during the time of the 19th century, opened its doors to immigrants. Before the independence from Spain, Peru was a closed country. We were a country that was not really welcoming of immigrants from Italy, from England, because Spain was very jealous of its colonies, right? But after the independence, we were broke. Yes, indeed, we had gold, we had children, we had silver, but we needed to find other ways of making money, right? So that's why, for example, the guano, the picking up, the harvesting of the guano, the poop of the seabirds, became a very important business. And also at the same time, we were losing slaves because they aged. The last immigration, or the let's say importation, of African slaves occurred at the end of the 18th century. So there were no new slaves from Africa. The ones that we had here were aging. They were not really working the way the Spaniards they needed them. So that's why it became a problem for the Spaniards to maintain. It was too expensive to maintain slaves, right? So the ones that were important, they were usually from Colombia, from Panama. So it was a complicated business, very expensive. So that's why first the Chinese workers came in the picture. Chinese that came from Canton, most of them. So approximately 100,000 of these Chinese came in about 30 years. This immigration started in 1849. And these Chinese men, in most of the cases, were illiterate. They did not know their rights, and they were abused. That's why in Peru we talk about a semi-slavery. Although, of course, they were not slaves when they came to Peru, they came free. But they did not know how they would be treated eventually, and they were pretty much treated as the black slaves, the African slaves, right? They came with contracts. That's why also in Peru we call about semi-slavery. But in reality, once they were here, they were treated as slaves, right? So we're going now to continue with the next image. And here we have a picture. Well, this one here is very famous in Peru. This is one of the few pictures of coolies working in sugar plantations. And this one in particular is very special because, and it's very sad because you can see a coolie. Coolie is the way how we called the Chinese workers in Peru and also in North America. So far I remember, it's the exact same way they were called, with shackles. Can you see the shackles, right? In the feet. Also, this man was indeed treated as a slave. And possibly this was a man who tried to run away. Also, that's why he was treated in this form, in this way. Many of them died because of multiple reasons, malnourishing. They were not really well taken care of. They were not properly dressed up. They also were exposed to diseases that they did not build any immunity against, like endemic diseases from Peru. They actually came here to work and to make a living, to return home. In most of the cases, they were not able to return home. The workers that came to Peru from China, most of them were like in between the ages of 10 years old and 40 years old. So we're talking indeed about child labor. And they were paid like half of the salaries that usually a regular Peruvian worker will be paid. Also, years after the first arrival of Chinese started, and I'm sure that the Chinese in China did not know how the Chinese that were here were being treated. That's why there was a constant influx of Chinese coming to Peru. So these Chinese people came in a period of big changes. So in the year 1854, so the beginning of this immigration was 1849. So in 1854, we had the abolishing of the black slavery. Finally, something promised in the independence in 1821, but it didn't happen until officially that year I mentioned. So that was the time when the black slaves left the hacienda houses, the plantations, and the Chinese took over their spaces, their workplaces, and they were treated as badly or even worse. Why? Because the landowners did not care on their health, did not care on, it was not an investment for them. They didn't care. When we're talking about slaves, black slaves, the slaves, you pay for everything. You pay for themselves. You pay for their health. So you want to have them in good shape. In the case of the Chinese, they were not the responsibility of the landowners. Of course, that they paid for the transportation in ships, and that's why also their abuse on them, because they didn't even pay salaries sometimes for years, because they said, well, I have invested in your transportation to Peru, so I will not pay you. I will just give you rice, for example, some vegetables, and that's it, right? So they could not go anywhere. They could not escape in some cases, right? So I want you to put in the position of these Chinese men that are creating this hatred inside them, and they are being discriminated constantly, and they were doing things nobody else wanted to do. For example, this work. This is the picking up or the harvest of the guano. For my friends that haven't heard before about the guano, or maybe you have heard about the guano and you think, oh, this must not be what I think. Guano is the poop of the sea birds. It's very famous in Peru and in Chile as well, because our coastline is desert, and therefore, because we don't have rain, the accumulation of the poop of these birds can reach out meters high. But guano is not just poop for us. Guano still is in use as a fertilizer. It's the most effective fertilizer you can have, and also it is very rich in nitrogen and phosphorus, or nitrate and phosphorus. So these compounds are the ones that make this material very good. Was it only men who came to Peru, Andrea, or Chinese women too? Andrea, excellent question. In the case of the Chinese immigrants, we are talking about 90, maybe 95% of men only, and very few women.
The intention was that the men will come here to like focus just in working. The idea was that they will be for a period of time that ended up being 8 years in some cases. So can you imagine like leasings of 8 years? Many Chinese were kidnapped in China, in Canton. They were kidnapped, like just taken into the ships, and they had no idea where they were going. So this way of bringing Chinese, it completely failed eventually, because Chinese, they did not found, like when you have a family, you have the courage to keep working, to set roots. Many of these Chinese did not found that. Eventually, they married Peruvians. That's different case with the Japanese. The Japanese came usually in family groups, right? So you have here the guano, you have the excrement of the seabirds, which has a strong, potent smell. Imagine being exposed to picking up guano every day. Your lungs, your health will be completely damaged. And that's why also many malnourished Chinese died because of this work that nobody wanted to do. Also, they work in the picking up of the saltpeter, or salitre as we call it, and this nitrate of sodium is also an element, a chemical element that can be used as a fertilizer, but it was also very famous in its days as gunpowder. Right. So they also were employed in doing other jobs that nobody wanted to do because they were very dangerous. For example, opening the roads in the Andes, very difficult, dangerous work that only, like the strongest men could do. And many of these Chinese men, when they were explained about the benefits of coming to Peru, they were explained that Peru was a land of, wonders and great climate, and in reality, they had no idea that the Andes are so extreme in terms of temperature, of climate. They were not equipped properly. They did not know where they were going. So they were completely lied. And there's no Peruvian historian that can say the opposite. We all know that this was the reality. And this part of the history of Peru is one of the darkest in our history, right? So here we have some pictures of Chinese workers next to a railroad. And something interesting, I would like to mention also this, because when you are talking about being exposed to a new complete reality, like in the case of the Chinese, something important is that you can be exposed to diseases, right? And the Chinese men were taken to work in the Andes, in zones that were swampy, in zones that were extremely hot or extremely cold. And one of the diseases that they catch was pretty much sort of like a new disease for the Republican men in Peru. It is called in different ways: Oroya Fever, Verruga Peruana, or Carrion disease. So this picture is of a Chilean soldier. Later we're going to talk about this, that catch the disease. The disease is transmitted by insects. I think maybe one day we will do a special about endemic diseases in Peru, and especially using images from the potteries made by the pre-Hispanic men. So this will be very interesting. So here we have these wounds that are the mark of the disease in the body. People die between the first month of after catching the disease. So it was a disease that had no cure back then. And well, in this picture, you see a Chilean soldier that catch the disease, but many Chinese men catch that disease and just die because nobody knew how to treat it, right? So here now we're going to talk about the time of the War of the Pacific, known also as the War of the Guano or the War of the Saltpeter, Guerra del Salitre, right, in Spanish. So here we have two pictures, right? We have the picture of before the war, and we have the picture of after the war, right? So what a big difference. You can see the territory of Chile being much smaller. Chile is a long, long, long country that has a coast and Andes, and Peru, which is much norther, used to not limit with Chile. Can you see this space over here? This space used to belong to Bolivia, my friends, until the time of the war. In the year 1879, Bolivia lost its coast, is way out to the Pacific. And there's something really sad about this territory. Bolivia did not really set too much here in this territory that belonged to them, because the Andes in this section are very steep, and it was complicated for Bolivia to create connections with the coast. So in a way, this also benefited the later possession of this territory by Chile. And Peru also used to be much longer. Look here in this section. This territory that eventually became Chile, as you can see over here, was very, very rich in saltpeter, salitre, and also guano. Why? Well, the desert basically, and the let's say the current of Humboldt. The Humboldt current is a current that is very cold, that comes from the south, from the Antarctica. So this current creates the let's say the driest desert in the world. So these are, the components that finally create in this section a desert that is very rich in this mineral. Remember something, the Spaniards did not care on saltpeter or guano because they did not know yet about the benefits of those. So all of these guano and saltpeter became important after the independence from Spain. So Chile declared war to Bolivia and then to Peru in the year 1879, and this war continued until 1883. It was a terrible, devastating war for Bolivia and for Peru. But talking about Peru, it was devastating for many reasons. It devastated our economy, it devastated the extension of the territory, and also psychologically, it destroyed the psychology of the Peruvians. Because at some point, Chile got so strong, and they had, by the way, a very good, very advanced, let's say, weaponry. They were actually very well equipped. So they got so good in the war that they pretty much won every battle in every battlefield. And so much that eventually there was an invasion of Lima. Yes, my friends, the city of Lima, capital of Peru, was invaded by Chilean troops, by Chilean soldiers, and the flag of Chile was put in the government palace of Peru until the year of their return in the year 1883. So imagine how terrible for Peru something like that was. In the meantime, well, we have Chile winning different wars, and also we have the landing of Chile in the north of Peru, Chimbote, in September 1880. Why this is important? Well, this group that first touched land in Peruvian territory, right, in 1880, was a group also that months before, they were blocking the ports of Peru. They were trying to put pressure for Peru to release the territories of Tarapacá and Arica, territories that eventually became Chilean, right? Because the Chilean government did not receive the answer they wanted from Peru, they sent it, this General Patricia Lynch, this gentleman is very important in our story, to finally take the Peruvian territory, so start the invasion. So first they reach out the north, and the north and the south of Peru, the coast in general, is very, very connected with agriculture still nowadays. But but in that time, the sugar fields were very important. Sugar plantations were very important. So Mr. Patricio Lynch, this general, called the Red Prince, also by the Chileans, a very important hero for Chileans. For Peruvians, he was the most nefastest personality, of course, of that time. So he started with the destruction of the haciendas in Chimbote, in the north of Peru, and demanding war taxes to the landowners. So when they got into the haciendas, they discovered the following. What they discover? They discover Chinese men in the worst conditions in those haciendas, in those farms, right? In those lands, right? That were hacinated, that were all packed in very, very tiny, like shacks. They were, some of them, very sick. They were all very, let's say, confused, right? So well, something really curious is that, well, here you can see a picture of Patricia Lynch with all of his soldiers, right? So Patricia Lynch, the person that was in charge of that, let's say, committee that took that territory and that destroyed the haciendas, we call him Sanguinario in Peru. Of course, he's the Red Prince in Chile, right? It's important to know both positions, very, very important. So sanguinaria and bloody, right? Because he also, they kill, they sack, they destroy, yeah, right? But something really curious about Patricia Lynch is that this man was a very well trained man that also served for a period of his life to the Queen of England. Chile and England have a very deep history, very, very deep connection. At some point, maybe I'm going to eventually say a lecture about it, until we have, a Chilean guys that will give us more information about this situation. So what happened? Patricia Lynch, here I have a little summary about him. Patricia Lynch fought in the Opium War. Yes. And, well, there were two Opium Wars. So he fought in the first Opium War over here. And he was very well trained in Cantonese. He was fluent in Cantonese, which was coincidentally the language that most of the Chinese that were here in Peru spoke. So before the arrival of the Chilean troops, the Chinese did not speak to anyone because they did not know Spanish. Nobody could understand their needs. Nobody really cared about them. There was no official representatives from the government of Peru that spoke to them directly. So I can imagine, that the terrible isolation feeling they were having, right? But this man came and talked to them directly. You can imagine, of course, the feeling that these Chinese had, that they could finally say all the terrible things they experienced, all the terrible times they passed. And right after, they saw the intention of these Chileans to support them. In reality, what we have to be a little bit impartial here. The Chileans were trying to do whatever they could to disequilibrate, to destroy the economy of the Peruvians and put pressure to the landowners. So if they were not paying war taxes, what they were doing is liberating their coolies. They freed their coolies. And the coolies saw the Chileans as their saviors, right? And when the Chileans came to the, yes, my dear Erin, he was fluent in Cantonese. Yes. So when the Chileans continued their march in different parts of territories, they were doing actually everything by sea. So they were moving from the north to the south. They reached out Ica and they landed in Ica, and they also continued doing the same. They were asking for war taxes, and also they started to liberate more coolies, right? So there is one character that comes up in this story, and this man is called Liu Tang Xing Shin. Liu Tang Xing Shin, also known in Spanish as Quintin Quintana. And why? Because he Castellanized, he changed into Spanish, or he tried to make his name a little bit more easy to pronounce in Spanish, right? So Quintin Quintana, he was a sort of like wealthy at some point for a coolie, wealthy man. He lived in good comfort, right? He was part of the first generation of coolies who came to Peru. We're talking about the 1840s, 1850s, right? So he had terrible times in Peru, as most of coolies. He was mistreated. He was not paid for many years. Finally, he got his freedom, right? He did not return to China because he formed a family with a Peruvian woman. He had children here in Peru. And in his own words, he referred to Peru as he had nothing against the Peruvians, but he was angry of what Peruvians were doing with his brothers, right? This is information from Chilean sources, right? Because later his life ended up in Chile, right? He went in direction to Chile. So, well, he decided to unite the forces of the Chileans in the liberation of the Chinese, right? And this man also swore oaths to the Chileans. He supported the Chileans with food. He gave his home for the Chileans to live. And where he lived was not far away from Lima, from the capital. So he promised to support the Chileans in all forms. If the Chileans kill, he will kill. If the Chileans burn, he will burn. He completely turned his back to Peru because he saw how much his Chinese men were suffering, right? So this is when we talk about karma, karma is terrible. So this is what happened in a terrible time of the history of Peru, right? And these Chinese men, which eventually became big numbers, we're talking about 3,000 more or less Chinese, who marched in direction to Lima. And came in direction to the city now as part of the Chilean forces. The General Lynch and later on other Baquerano and other Chilean generals that were very important in the time of the occupation of Lima, they decided to take the city, right, as to put pressure to Lima to release the territories in the south. So the story says that this Chinese committee of more or less 3,000 all together came to the Temple of Pachacamac that is located about 25 kilometers away from Lima, southwards Lima. And in this temple, this is a pre-Hispanic temple, they made a ceremony led by Quintín Quintana, and about 1,000, more or less 1,000 Chinese men gathered there, and they swore oaths to the Chileans, doing a ceremony to the Chinese god of war, Guan Yu, right? Drinking blood from a rooster that was sacrificed there, right? So each one that was drinking this blood swore that will support the Chilean soldiers until the end. And many of these men already fought in the Opium Wars. So they were trained soldiers. In some of the cases also, they were very skillful because they knew the city. They've been already in the city. They could help to find out different places. Also, they helped in the deactivation of mines, right? So they really were very compromised with the Chilean cause, right? But would I say that they were fighting for Chile? I would not say that. The reason is because to fight for something, for a country, you need to know the country. They did not know Chile. They were fighting simply against Peruvians. Right? So that would be my opinion. Of course, Chileans said that these Chinese were fighting for Chile. Well, it really depends on the perspective, right? We know also that many of these Chinese coolies now enlisted and part of the Chilean army. They even made hats for the Chilean soldiers because the desert in the coast can be really, really hot. Also to cover the head of the soldiers and give them a more efficient shade, right? Shadow, sorry. Here, we have a terrible picture of the arrival of the Chileans into Lima. This is the Morro Solar here, and this is how Lima looked like back then. So this is a picture, one of the pictures that the Chileans took during their invasion. We don't really have too many pictures, Peruvian pictures. Honestly, well, we were the biggest losers, honestly. It was a terrible, tragic time. So there are not pictures mainly from Peruvian perspective. More the pictures are from Chilean perspective. So we have here the district of Chorrillos and Barranco, which were completely destroyed. And in part, the destruction was effective because of the compromised Chinese who deactivated the bombs for the Chilean soldiers. So anyways, here we have a historic picture of the arrival of the Chilean troops into Lima on January 17, 1881. And for that moment, Limanians knew very well what the Chinese were doing. And something terrible happened. So Before the arrival of the Chileans into Lima on January 17, there was a terrible sacking and destruction of all the businesses of the Chinese in Lima. So we did bad before, we continue doing bad. Why? Because we were hating the position of the coolies that supported the Chileans. But these people that were in Lima were innocent Chinese descendants, in most of the cases, were first generation married to Peruvians that stay in Peru, that open businesses. But already we knew about Quintin Quintana, who was a man pretty much the same. And there was the sort of like the fear that there would be, suddenly a raising up of the Chinese that will also, support the Chileans. So we know that there was a number of about 300 Chinese who were killed in Lima by the hands of Limanians in these times of despair and fear, right? So, and also a lot of prejudice happened after that time too. If there were already prejudice, later the prejudice continued for many decades. It was needed to pass many decades to finally ease up and understand that we were wrong since the beginning, right? So here we have some information about the 300 Chinese men who were killed in the streets of Lima, businesses that were confiscated, many Chinese, although that trying to prove that they love Peru, they stay here in Peru, right? And it's honorable to see that there were people that, although they were hated, they continue staying here because they had children, because they had businesses, because they did really love this land, right? And they didn't accuse everybody for the mistakes of one or the other or other, right? So I really hope you enjoy this story. It's a story that most Peruvians don't know, my friends. It's a story that will turn just the camera just for a little while. So it's a story that most Peruvians don't know. And it is so tragic to imagine that we Peruvians that have been mistreated also as indigenous when the conquest came and were discriminated also ended up discriminating others. People that were here looking for opportunities that were completely lied, that were confused. Oh, gracias, Andrea. Thank you so much for your tip support. It helped me really, really a lot to continue doing these events. Muchas gracias. So this story, which is in part a tragic, very, very tragic story, is a story also that gives us an idea about how important is to understand history to never make the same mistakes again. We Peruvians usually think of ourselves as the poor souls that were always mistreated, but now you see that we've made mistakes. We've made several of those mistakes in our history, and that we were not just, angels, right? But why I'm bringing this to the carpet, to the table? Well, it is because Peru is a land of different cultures, of different ethnicities. We must be proud of all of these ethnicities, not just Peru, all the world. And all of these different societies that eventually, conform the country, that they did not have it easy also at the beginning, right? So my people in Peru do not know this story, right? If we talk about Peruvians, they don't remember how they badly treated the Chinese, and also that this eventually caused a revolution, right? So, thank you so much for coming to this chapter of the Untold History of Peru. Andrea, thank you so much for your support. Marilyn, Larry, Molly, Adrian, muchas gracias that you helped me a lot to continue doing my research and investigating more. And also tomorrow, I'm going to be taking you to Barranco. So if you can, please come with me. We're going to have a nice walk in Barranco in the Bohemian district of Lima. And if you like these events, I want to invite you to join to my next event that I call, also because this is a new series, that I call the Controversial Stories of Peru. Oh, yes, Marilyn, it is true. Yes, it is the same story. Look, we humans, make the same mistakes over and over again. And we have to remember, never forget these events in our history. So this controversial story is going to be about Bolivar. The name of this event is Bolivar, Friend or Enemy of Peru. Simon Bolivar, the great liberator of Peru. Why we don't see Bolivar with good eyes? So please come to this meeting. I'm sure you're going to find it fascinating. I'm sure you're going to love this story. I'm going to also bring lots of pictures, and we're going to be using information from a book that is also called like that. Bolivar, enemy number one of Peru, friend or enemy of Peru. Or Peru. Linda, muchas gracias. Thanks so much for your support. It helps me a lot, a lot, a lot. Muchas gracias. You're also helping Hey Go because a percentage of the tips also help Hey Go to continue keeping this platform open and free to the world. So muchas gracias. So here you have my information. Oh, I don't know why it's not functioning. So, okay, better. So you can, if you wish, take a picture. You can follow me on my Facebook group, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube channel. We have also a website if you wish to see also my in-person tours in Lima, what I do in Lima. Oh, Andrea's asking, is the Barranco area with all the street art? Yes, Andrea, we will see again the street art. We're going to have the chance of give a look to the ocean. It's going to be really, really nice. Please come. I would love to have you. And well, you are welcome to Lima anytime. I do tours every week. If you can, please follow my Heygo channel. If you see a button in the upper part that says follow, so please click there and you're going to have access to all my upcoming tours. Yes, Punquita, that's right. That tour in Barranco is really relaxing. We're going to see lots of ocean views. It's going to be really fun. So please, you're all welcome. Come tomorrow. I would love to spend my Saturday, part of my Saturday with you. So, well, sending you lots of love from Lima, and muchas gracias for your tip support. If you would like to support this channel and also Hey Go with a tip, as you know, this is a free tour, so it's just supported with tips. I will activate a button, so there you can later, if you wish, like click there, and if you have the chance, support with any amount. So that would be wonderful. So muchas gracias. Have a lovely rest of the day and lovely weekend. Best to you. Take care. Gracias. Gracias, Linda. Thank you so much. See you soon. Muchas gracias. Bye-bye.